Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Yes, we're gonna go ahead and get started. So good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. Thank you for being here. My name is Erica Washington. I am a senior program associate with Impact Justice on their Restorative Justice Project team. And my pronouns are she, her, hers. I am joining you all over Zoom, but in my small little apartment in Washington, D.C., where I was born and raised. But very excited to share this space with you and also be in conversation with our brilliant panelists today. Before we get started, I just wanted to say, today we're going to discuss what it means and what it takes for restorative justice to be held by the community. Our toolkit, a link to which I will make sure is put in the chat, really offers a step-by-step process for setting up a community-held restorative justice diversion program. It offers guides for hosting listening sessions with community members to really get a sense of what the needs of your community really are, to teach about and speak about what restorative justice is and what it can offer, and see, how those needs match up with restorative justice. So we have guides for hosting those sessions. We have questionnaires for identifying a community-based organization that's well positioned, let's say, to hold your community's restorative justice diversion program, and so much more. Guidance around funding your program, and again, really laid out in a step-by-step way to assist. But today we have only an hour, and we're going to spend that hour exploring some of the most important considerations as we work towards a community-held restorative justice future. And so to that end, like I said, we have some brilliant panelists, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves in just a bit. But quickly, I want to go over a few of our quick notes for today's time together. So as I said, we have unfortunately just an hour, 60 minutes. I encourage you all to use the chat function. Please send your questions, your comments. We are going to be collecting those, and we're definitely intending to spend some time at the end trying to answer some of the questions you all bring to us. If you have technical issues, email Brian Taylor, that's who you heard at the top of our time together, at brian@pretrial.org. The recording and the slides from today's webinar will be available on JDAI Connect. And we encourage you to join JDAI Connect if you're not currently a member. That is where we have already started a conversation about restorative justice being community held, and other topics both related to restorative justice and related to other youth justice topics. So go ahead and join, and that again is where the recording and slides can be found following today's time together. And so now I'm going to ask Wakumi to please get us started and just introduce herself and then pass it down.
Sure. Good afternoon or morning, depending on where folks are. Everyone, it's great to be here. My name is Wakumi Douglas. I am one of the co-founders and executive director of S.O.U.L Sisters Leadership Collective, which is an organization focused on disrupting and interrupting cycles of violence, all forms of violence, poverty, and oppression through doing youth leadership development work and restorative justice and healing justice work. We do our work in Miami, Florida, and in New York City. And my pronouns are she, her, hers. And it's great to be here again. And I'll pass it off to you, Venus.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's wonderful to see all of the places in the chat of where folks are joining us from: Hawaii, New York, Ohio. And for those of you dealing with the inclement weather, we are sending our graces and our love to you today. I am the Chief Assistant District Attorney in Contra Costa County, which is in Northern California, about 20 minutes away from San Francisco, just to give folks a better landmark. I have been with the office since 2018. I was fortunate enough to join District Attorney Dinah Becton, who is the first woman and the first Black person of color, Black woman, to hold the position in the office's 187-year history. So it is an honor to work side by side with her and be able to do the work that we are doing to turn things around in our criminal justice system. I will now turn it over to Sandra.
Hello, everyone. It's so beautiful and wonderful to be here with all of you. I love seeing the chats rolling in from all of the locations. So my name is Sandra Rodriguez. I'm a senior program specialist on the Restorative Justice Project team at Impact Justice. I am based out of our Oakland office, though I'm talking to you all today from Portland, Oregon. And I've been working in restorative justice in one way or another for nearly 10 years. I've done RJ work in academia. I have been a restorative community conferencing facilitator, and I've also organized around restorative justice, both as an alternative to incarceration and as an alternative to many traditional school discipline policies at the K through 12 level and beyond. And I have been at IJ since 2017, and it's a wonderful team that I'm a part of, and I'm so happy to be with all of you today. And I will pass it back to Erica.
Thank you. Thanks all of you for introducing yourselves. We're going to hear a lot more about them and from them in just a little, but first I'm going to attempt to create kind of a shared understanding of why we believe restorative justice needs to be held by the community. So yeah, as soon as we get through some of those slides, I'm gonna pass it back on to the panel. And like I said, you'll get to hear more from these wonderful speakers. So, created and held by community and community-based organizations, element 8. So there are many ways that people practice restorative justice. We at Impact Justice are really guided by 8 elements. So these are 8 distinct elements, and they have evolved, they've been evaluated, and they've been adapted over time. So one of our core elements is that restorative justice diversion programs are created and held by community and community-based organizations. And so this really comes out of a recognition that the community is at the very foundation of how restorative justice conceives of justice, right? Conflict with restorative justice, really conflict is not outsourced, but we instead rely on the wisdom and the knowledge and the expertise of community members to address the issues that impact them. It's the relationships that bind families together and communities together that power restorative justice processes. And I always like to say when I'm trying to impress this upon people, just that community really is the most embodied experience of our interconnectedness, right? It's critical for relational justice, right, that we seek with restorative justice to be rooted in the community, in the way that we do the work and where we do the work. And so, you know, being held by community means that restorative justice processes function best and are in alignment with the values and goals of restorative justice when operating fully outside of the legal system. So when we say that restorative justice diversion is in alignment with the values and the goals of restorative justice when it operates outside of the legal system, a major goal we're thinking about is the goal of accountability, right? A community partner that we work with in Philly, his name's Ghani Songster. He likes to use the analogy of getting in a boat and rowing towards healing, right? So essentially with restorative justice, being accountable for the harm we cause means we get in a boat, pick up an oar, and row like hell towards healing and transformation. It is about actively exerting power, not staying neutral or being passive, but shifting power away from harm and towards healing. And so I do just want to, Kempis Ghani Songster, he is incredible. If you want to look into his work, he works with the Youth Arts Empowerment Project, which is a community-based organization in Philly, also with the Amistad Law Project, and he has a podcast called Move It Forward. I just want to always trying to plug his amazing work, but he uses this analogy of right, getting in a boat and actually picking up an oar, because it's not passive, it's not neutral. And so I bring this forward right from jump because this really deeply applies to what we're doing. And so, how does this apply? Well, restorative justice is about accountability when harm is caused, right? Our system causes unnecessary harm. And in this example, I mean our criminal punishment system, but so many systems that also play into any work that we do in this country, and certainly the work that we do in restorative justice diversion. So restorative justice is about accountability when harm is caused. We know our system causes unnecessary harm. To ask that others be accountable for the harm they cause requires system accountability for the harm it causes. And system accountability looks like investing in community-based solutions for shrinking system reliance. The active exercise of power away from harm means investing in community-based solutions, right? It means empowering communities to act as honestly a protective structure against restorative justice diversion programs becoming another arm of a system that was not built and designed for healing. So developing restorative justice diversion programs with good intentions, but without acknowledging current systems of oppression, runs the risk of these programs replicating the oppressive structures that we are aiming to dismantle. I'm sure everyone on this call can agree with that. We are aiming to dismantle these oppressive structures. And so we have to acknowledge this dynamic, this power dynamic, in order to ensure that what we're building does not turn around and look like the structures we're trying to dismantle. And so that means that whenever possible, it is our job to promote models that avoid or limit contact with the system, right? Criminal justice contexts, however brief, can have negative psychosocial and employment effects and often fail to address the underlying cause of criminal behavior. So that is from the National Research Council, and we can provide the full citation in the chat. What's great, all of this kind of doom, but what's really great, honestly, and what I could have started with is that ultimately restorative justice diversion processes function best when they're community held, right? So here are some of the community held, here's some of what we have learned, right, from doing this work within community, held and led by community, and this is what we've seen to be true. It provides a better understanding of conflict and needs due to the community vantage point. It increases community resources, skill sets, and opportunities to strengthen community connections, right? We know that if the community is at the foundation, then these tools should be in the community. They already have tools that they can apply and supplement, and also creating and enforcing that community fabric is critical. It takes into consideration legitimate distrust of the system and system actors. It increases program stability. What I've had to say more recently is we shouldn't aim solely to build around, build these structures, build these programs around, one newly elected shiny system partner. These need to be in the community, and they will gain stability by being in the community. And lastly, not lastly, actually. So it increases program stability, like I said. It also allows a full focus to be on healing harm, not adversarial considerations. You know, as someone who I spent almost 3 years as a capital defense attorney working in Durham, North Carolina with the Center for Death Penalty Litigation. I have spent a portion of my career working in the system, and I feel the adversarial nature of it. I felt it in my bones, like I felt it in my very being. Moving this work outside of a system that was not built for healing is critically important. And lastly, it decreases the negative consequences associated with criminal system contact, right? I gave the quote from the previous slide, but even walking in that building has a consequence. And so we have to take all of these into consideration when we are thinking about how best to allow restorative justice diversion to flourish. And that means flourish in and held by and led by community. And so thank you for listening to all of that. I want to just share a bit of a video because this is really exemplifies all of the beautiful brilliance that situating these programs within community-based organizations really allows to be brought to the work that we're doing. And so here is a short video from Soul Sisters, and you're going to hear a lot more from their executive director and founder, Wakumi, as soon as we transition to our panel.
It is our duty to fight.
It is our duty to fight.
It is our duty to win.
It is our duty to win.
We must love and protect each other.
We must love and protect each other.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
Change the world, change the world, change the world, gonna help a girl. Change the world, change the world, change the world, gonna help a girl. Freedom, change the world, freedom, gonna help a girl. Freedom, change the world, help a girl. That's what I see you doing. You're gonna change the world, change the world. You gotta change the world, change the world, change the world, gonna help a girl.
The Soul Sisters Leadership Collective is a groundbreaking leadership development movement
that mobilizes girls of color in New York City and Miami to interrupt cycles of poverty and violence.
A lot of young women of color have it harder, and therefore they need that extra push to keep going because society wants them to fail. They expect them to fail.
They feel like they have to be something that they're not. They should be okay with being just them. And this program will help them understand that just them is okay.
We spend a lot of time wondering who is going to fix this. It's our girls.
Our model has 4 pillars: social justice, healing,
Leadership, and the arts.
Soul Sisters is creating a space for them to do the work they need to do internally with their hearts and their minds to be the transformative and revolutionary leaders that we absolutely critically need.
we do have the power to bring in the change. With all of our creative ideas, we will make the change to the better.
I'm already active in my community, and I already want to create spaces for people that identify as women.
All right. I know we'd all love to hear more of that, but I want us to have as much time as possible to actually hear from our speakers. So with that, we're going to transition into the panel, and I am going to be asking the first question. So please give me just one moment. But thank you so much, everyone, for listening and just being here and being a part of this conversation today. So with that, I'm actually going to kick the first question over to Wakumi. And that question, if I can actually get my stuff up.
I have it up, Erica. Do you want me to read it? Would that be supportive?
That would be, yes. That
okay.
Would be supportive.
The question that you very, intentionally prepared us to answer is, please tell us about yourself and how you're currently supporting RJ being held in community. And you gave us 3 minutes, so I'm starting my timer. So again, my name is Wakumi Douglas. I am one of the co-founders and executive director of Soul Sisters Leadership Collective, which you all just got to learn a little bit about through that video, which I have to just say was produced 100% by young people with adult co-conspirators. We were there to help guide, but they storyboarded and created the script, and the song that you heard in the background was written by the young people. And that says a lot about how we do our work. Our work is truly youth driven and youth led with intergenerational support, love and kindness and guidance from adult co-conspirators and collaborators. I come into this work as a young person who as an adult who as a young person was directly impacted by state violence. My father actually was recently released after having done 33 years of time. And so I always say I did time on the outside with my father for 33 years. I grew up in the prisons, visiting him, and also was arrested as a girl, and also am a survivor of child sexual assault. And so I'm one of the girls that our program supports. And also I would say that a part of my story is very much about being saved by activism, organizing, and leadership development. That adults saw the leader in me, they saw my vision, and that redirected me onto a path of healing and community support from a path of really a pipeline to prison, like a lot of the young people that we work with. Our work in restorative justice with Soul Sisters is twofold. We have a restorative justice diversion program that we've been working for the past 3 years or something like that, 3.5 years, to develop with the Impact Justice team. Sandra and I have been working together for a very long time on this project. And we finally have our first crew of staff. And due to the pandemic, we were delayed in our launch of our restorative justice diversion program, but have a signed MOU with the state attorney in Miami-Dade County to begin receiving referrals. Then we also do restorative justice work in New York City. And this is a recidivism reduction approach for girls and non-binary youth deeper in the pipeline who already have open cases. And we are offering restorative justice as a service to alternative to incarceration programs, detention facilities, et cetera. So they can call us instead of calling police when there are conflicts and such in those facilities as a way to reduce recidivism. And there are other things that we do in RJ, but my 3 minutes is over and I'm gonna honor the time commitment and go ahead and pass it to Venus. And I'm looking forward to continuing the chat.
Good afternoon again, or morning, depending again on where you are. Again, Venus Johnson. How I came to the work, it's really interesting. Like I said, I've been in my current office since 2018. Actually, Wakumi, let me start my timer so I can be in line with you in honoring our time. Came to the office in 2018, but thankfully for me, and I always say this, I had history with restorative justice prior to joining the Contra Costa County DA's office. I've been a prosecutor for about 15 years total. And so I've been in different offices at the county level, at the state level, and even done some city work. And when I worked for a year in between my state work and where I currently am now, I was the director of public safety in the city of Oakland, California for the current mayor, who is Libby Schaff. And she was looking for someone who could stand, I think, as a bridge between community and government or law enforcement. I was born and raised in Oakland. I am the daughter of an immigrant. My father worked for the Oakland Police Department for many years. And so I stood in kind of a very unique space and place where I have community trust, but I also understood law enforcement and had, I think to some degree, their obvious trust as well. And so I began really in that role going into neighborhoods in kind of the more, I would say, less affluent parts of the city, right? Depending on your zip code is determinant of a lot of the resources that you're going to get. And so the places in our city that saw the most shootings, that had the worst reading score levels and math score levels for kids, I literally surveyed all of the schools in the city of Oakland and the elementary schools. I looked at where parks were located. I looked at food, resources in those communities. And those were all of the places in the city of Oakland that had the highest gun violence. And so I partnered with a organization called Restorative Justice, or RJOY, for Oakland youth, and they are just phenomenal. And I brought them into community and got out of the way is what I did. I wanted to create a space and place to assist community to be able to learn, communicate, and tackle challenges and issues the parents were seeing, the kids were seeing, and the solutions they wanted. So when I got to the DA's office in Contra Costa County, thinking about a pre-filing program prior to kids even having charges brought against them, to go through this process was a no-brainer for me. It was easy. And thankfully and luckily, I am the person in charge of policy for the office. And so we were able to really bring impact justice in, bring in our community partner in as well. See, that's my timer. It goes so fast.
I know. A suggested time.
We've got timers going.
Oh, Lord.
So anyway, we brought them in and again handed it over to them as well. And I'm sure we'll get into more of that soon. But that's my background with restorative justice.
Thank you. Thank you, Venus. Thank you, Wakumi. And so we're going to jump into the second question, which is going to be posed to all four of us, but we're going to start again with you, Wakumi. Can you tell us how power has impacted your role as it relates to community-held restorative justice?
Yeah, for sure. So I thought a lot about how I wanted to answer this question, and I'm thinking about power in two ways, and this is how we think about it at Soul Sisters. We think about the dynamics of power over, and we think about the dynamics of power with, and people power, and the power that we galvanize when we organize our communities for the greater good. And so in terms of power over, I think sort of obviously, and Venus can probably speak to this too, as a person who represents this state, that the state has power, right? As it relates to community folks holding restorative justice. So in Miami-Dade County, we had to build very intentional relationships with the Chief Justice over juvenile matters, with the state attorney's office. We had to build relationships with the public defender and all the folks who are in the system to be able to get them to say, actually, yeah, we're here for this. And we are open to negotiating what the terms of you all receiving referrals could be. And we had to be in a delicate dance that sometimes involves sort of harder pushback to maintain the boundary between the state and community. To be able to advocate that young people not be penalized for what happens in the circle process, right? Because that's a thing that we're very concerned about, and the way that power can look when restorative justice is directly connected to a state juvenile justice system is that the state could overreach and reach out of the courtroom and into the circle, which is something that we have to be really mindful to protect against. And so certainly there are those sorts of power dynamics, but I also
night, baby.
I also really, it's okay, Venus. I also really wanted to be able to share a little bit the story of the power of the people power that led to Miami-Dade County even being a restorative justice friendly environment. That it really was its organizers and activists who said, no, it's not okay for there to be a school to prison pipeline, who said, we need restorative justice and our kids deserve this. Even the kids in the neighborhoods like Venus described, right? They deserve it too, not just white affluent kids in white affluent neighborhoods and schools. And folks took to the streets. Folks protested, folks spoke out at school board meetings, folks made it really clear, organizers made it really clear that this is what the community needs and wants. And it's my firm belief that it's because of those organizers that the reason that when we presented restorative justice as an option, as a thing that we could do to prevent young people from ending up deep in the pipeline to prison, that the state was ready to hear us. It was because of the ground that was tilled by organizers. And in fact, and I'm out of my 3 minutes, I'll share this one quick story. It was the Chief Justice over juvenile matters in Miami-Dade County first saw restorative justice in action at a school where he was invited to attend the same way they have mock trials. It was a mock RJ process. He witnessed it at a school. It was organized by local youth organizers at a middle school in Dade County, a Black middle school. And he was so impressed that he was ready to implement RJ right away in the juvenile legal system. And when we became ready, he was ready. So I just also want to talk about power in that way as well, that it's not just about the folks who have power and control and power over and who have dominant power, but also power from the grassroots, and organizing power matters a lot too.
Thank you, Wakumi. Venus, how about you? How has power impacted your role as it relates to community-held restorative justice?
Yeah, and just to continue the conversation from Wakumi, but also my comments that I was speaking, that I mentioned right before I ended my last answer. It was really important for us to get out of the way, and us meaning the district attorney's office. It was a foreign concept to a lot of people in my office. We stepped into an office, again, that had not had a progressive female Black woman, Democrat district attorney. And so a lot of the things that we were doing were really changing the way the system operated and interacted and showed up in community. And so for us, power is huge, right? Government really has to do nothing, and they sit on a throne of power. And to Wakumi's point, we didn't need our arms and legs and limbs to be reaching outside of the four walls of our building across town into the community center where youth were going through their conferencing and their restorative justice process. And so once our youth is referred, we're not involved. We don't sit in conference with them. We don't monitor them. The only update per se that we get about the youth, because they get about 9 months to go through the program and complete it. All we want to know is that they have enrolled, accepted responsibility, and that's about it. We just need to know that they are there and engaged in the process, and we get a notification at the end that says the youth has completed the program. We get no other details, and the file is closed out. That's it. That takes trust. That takes an exchange of power. It takes relinquishing power from our end and restoring power where it belongs into the community. We don't have the tools as government to give these kids and our children in our communities what they need. We're not in the neighborhoods. We are not in the schools every day. When I say we, I mean government, folks in my office, the judges, the DAs, whoever is an actor within the system per se. We are not best equipped at all times to handle or to provide the resources and the safety net of what our kids need. And so recognizing that, having conversations around that, putting the right supervisors and people in place in our office who were aligned with this thinking, because you've got to have the right people in the right positions as well. Policy means nothing if you don't have the right actors in place. And worked with Impact Justice and our community partner to come up with very thoughtful guidelines for how we were going to interact and exchange with one another. What information were we going to share? How were we going to share information? We have to, as part of our program, give over the police report to the community organization who is, doing the RJ for us in partnership. That was big. It's like, you want to do what? We obviously have to go through certain procedures and practices on our end to make sure that sensitive information is redacted. But again, to Wakumi's point, they had to go through kind of a trust building process, as did we. And the trust continues to build. And you have to just trust in the process. And again, as a government actor, just agree to get out of the way. That's the best advice I can give.
Thank you, Venus. Same question to you, Sandra.
Thanks, Erica. And thank you, Wakumi and Venus, for responding so beautifully. I also thought a lot about how to answer this question, and I wanted to respond to it both from the perspective of a community organizer, which I was for a while, and also an RJ facilitator, a practitioner. And power is enormous in all of those areas. I've said for a long time that the role of an organizer, for example, is to support community members in finding out what change it is that they seek, and then support them in acquiring the tools and the methods by which to achieve that change. And an RJ facilitator is in a very similar role, where they support people in the healing that they seek, and in the reparation of the harm that they've caused, and the repair of the harm that they've caused. And they support them in stepping into their own power and agency in order to achieve that healing and that accountability. And the container for restorative justice, in my mind, has always been power. It's been the acknowledgement of it. It's been the reclamation of it. It's been from folks that traditionally have held it, such as systems, the giving of it, or at least the allowing of the taking of it. And looking at the very traditional organizing definition of power, which is simply the ability to act, it makes us wonder, what is our ability to heal? And in that regard, I really have always associated restorative justice with the recognition of one's power and agency to heal. Something else that I really believe is that RJ is not about humanizing systems, but rather about desystematizing humans. And so that means that we each, on an individual, collective, community level, need to not just learn something new, but remember something that we've forgotten, unlearn what we've been taught regarding how to respond to harm and how to respond to each other in a punitive and adversarial way. Because healing doesn't have a winner or a loser. And in the same way, organizing for restorative justice should be working towards collective liberation. And so to me, everything is very, very much entwined inside of this container of power, and how it is that we recognize it, honor it, and use it to work towards collective liberation. And I say this having worked with both system partners and community members, and we cannot leave power at the door when we enter restorative justice processes. And sadly, RJ is an area, due to it being co-opted in many ways, where that's a message that's been sent, that when we sit and circle together, we leave power at the door. And that's not true. We acknowledge it, we build it, and we hold it. And so if communities are able to achieve the changes that they seek, it also means that they are working towards the healing that they need. And I'll stop there and pass it back to you, Erica.
Thank you, Sandra. So I was also going to just give a bit of my perspective, also as a restorative justice diversion educator, training, technical assistance provider. I'm going to do that quickly because I do want us to have time for our final question and get into the questions that I see are coming in the chat. But a couple things that come to mind when I think about that question. The first being kind of the most obvious, which is that power dictates who gets a platform, right? And I mean, this is certainly a platform, and we are so grateful for it. And also, you know, we are a national organization. There is a lot of name recognition and power that comes from that, and we are always having to check ourselves. And I say this and speaking this out to other national restorative justice educators, technical assistance providers. It is critical that we are always checking ourselves on the platform that we're being given, the power that we're being given, and what that means and what we have to do with it. And also not simply staying in the position of getting to dole out power to others, but how do we do this work so that power becomes collectivized and is not situated in these big kind of flashy spaces, but is really with the community that, you know, that has the understanding of how we actually address harm and is the appropriate space to hold these programs. You know, I also, of course, will just note, and I feel like Wakumi can certainly speak to this even more than I can, but around this nonprofit industrial complex and being a 501c3, you know, when I think about how power impacts the work that we are doing as RJ educators, I think about the ways in which we sometimes have to, you know, or we're being asked to dance for our dinner. Just funding is obviously a significant way in which power is playing in the timetables, the deliverables. We always say, you know, we want to move at the speed of liberation, or, you know, we're paradigm shifting here, but paradigm shifting is by definition not on capitalism's timeline, right? And so it goes back, right, to this who is going to check you, who is going to say, you know, this microphone is not yours. And so I did just want to lift that up. And then the last thing is that we, you know, impact just, we have this model. I mean, I started the PowerPoint talking about this, our 8th element of our model, and it is a model that has been looked at and tested and adjusted and changed and adapted. And also, you know, we have these 8 core elements that constitute the foundation of how we do the work, and we are kind of armed with that when we go into community. And so some of this I have thoughts for, and I'll bring them up in our next question around like answers or action items, but some are just tensions and things that we're grappling with. And I know a lot of this will ring a bell with others, especially in positions like mine, to constantly be aware of, to ensure that you're working with community partners who are going to put this on the table and make sure that you see how power is operating in your role. And so I know I just kind of blubbled through that, but I'm gonna keep us moving because we're already a little bit off time. So passing it to Sandra to start us off on this last question. What is one thing that you hope those who share a similar role will go and do after this webinar?
I think I'm gonna just speak to the audience at large and say that I hope that, you know, everybody can walk away and look to themselves and really explore what degree of power and privilege they hold in society and community, and how they can use that to support restorative justice being in the hands of those that are directly involved, directly affected by various systems of oppression. And, you know, I cannot emphasize that enough, that our RJ facilitators, you know, should be survivors. They should be formerly incarcerated folks. They should be individuals that come to the work from the heart, first and foremost. And so that would be my hope, is that we can all just constantly be, you know, checking in with ourselves and figuring out, you know, is RJ in the hands of the folks that it ought to be in? I'll leave it at that. And I will pass it on to, I apologize, I moved away from my notes as well.
No problem. It's me. And so Sandra and I, as soon as we are done answering this question, Sandra right now is going to start looking at the chat, and we're going to prepare to answer some of your questions quickly. When I think about what one thing that someone in my role, right, national org, RJ educator role, it goes back to what I was speaking to earlier, right? Pay attention, make sure that the people who should be at the table when really looking at what community-based organization or who needs to be within that community-based organization, when you are training out about this tool of restorative justice diversion, it is that community partner who will hold you accountable. So my action item is, and we have tools to this that speak to this in the toolkit, but pay attention to who you're partnering with, and also recognize that implementing these programs, building up these programs, like that is also a part of the healing process, right? And community leading that is healing for community who has been on one end of this harm that the system has put forward. And so taking that away, right, that is actually undermining necessary healing that the process of even building a program allows for. So pay attention to who you're partnering with, and also in a lot of ways get out of the way. And so I'm going to pass it to Venus, and then Wakumi will end with you.
Oh boy. There's so much I want to say, but let me try and drill it down very quickly. When you engage in the work as a government actor, be transparent, be intentional. Don't go in with any hidden agenda, and really go in having done your homework, respecting the work that the community organizers, the experts in the RJ arena have put in over the years, the data they've collected around recidivism rates, the data they've collected around those who have been harmed, their satisfaction with the process, their appreciation of the process, and be prepared to just open your mind to think differently about what safety means. It doesn't always mean that a youth needs to be punished in a way that we think traditionally a youth needs to take responsibility for their actions. You know, we don't allow kids to drive until they're a certain age, vote until they're a certain age, buy alcohol until they're a certain age, but yet and still, as soon as they step or get involved in the criminal justice system, we expect them all of a sudden to be these adults that they are not. They are still children. I also encourage you to watch the language that you use. They're still kids. They are kids. And we have a responsibility to them, just as the community does, to ensure that they are happy, healthy, they don't harm themselves, they don't harm others. So that's the advice I would at least give from folks coming in from a governmental or prosecutorial perspective.
Okay, I'm putting my timer on because I know myself. Okay, I have three things I want to say. Two is for community-based organizations. The first thing is, if you're on this call and you're representing a community-based organization, the thing that's most important to situate yourself to be of service to your community around RJ is practice. You have to practice RJ all the time in every arena of your organization. RJ is not a program. It's a way of being. It's a way of showing up, like in every setting, with every person, all the time. And so practice in your staff meetings, practice if you're a supervisor, get called into circle as a supervisor and be held accountable. Experience what it's going to feel like for the young people in your community, because that's what's going to make you the most ideal community partner with a government agency. Practice, practice, practice. That's really important. The second thing is around funding, which I'm glad that you laid the groundwork for that, Erica. For folks from community organizations around funding, begin developing relationships with private foundation funders now. If you're thinking about getting started with an RJ diversion program, and also begin thinking about, if you don't already know, how government funding works in the place where you are. Because there are a lot of different, sometimes challenging and confusing aspects of government funding. So I'd really encourage you to begin thinking that through, finding allies and community that can support you in navigating the funding process, and be bold. Sometimes being bold doesn't work, but when it does, it works big. It's bigger because you were bolder. So the check you're going to get is a larger check. And so I really want to encourage folks to be bold. Let's not be shy. We want to keep our kids free. Let's be bold about our mission to do that. And then the thing that I would say for funders on the call who are listening, in the government space, I know this is a little bit more challenging, but any funders in the private space is fund big and fund innovation. Sometimes community-based organizations don't have all the numbers and research to show you to validate that the work that we do is important and matters and is going to make change. But think about how they fund, how venture capitalists fund in Silicon Valley. All these tech bros who are getting tens of millions of dollars for innocuous apps that don't matter, that fail, they lose all of the money and they've had no impact. Okay, like I want to encourage funders to think about all that money that's going down the drain. But when you fund a nonprofit organization that's going to do bold, innovative work, we're not going to let that happen. There's always going to be a return on the investment. And so I just want to ask funders to fund bigger and fund bolder, especially around these sorts of innovative abolitionist projects.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to pass it to Sandra to facilitate question and answer. I know we don't have a ton of time, but let's try to get a couple in, hopefully.
Yeah, thank you, Erica. And yeah, thank you all for your wonderful questions. I wish we could spend another couple of hours together to get to all of them. But I'm going to start from one of the earlier questions, and Wakumi, if we can begin with you, and then Venus, if you've got something to add afterward, that would be great. The question is, what strategy is used to divert youth to community-based agencies, and what tools or mechanisms are put into place to be culturally competent to the youth's needs or background? I'm going to put that in the chat, Wakumi.
Thank you, because I got my 5-year-old's tablet was having a challenge, so I missed some of what you said. All right, so in our program, the main way that youth are diverted is in partnership with the Miami-Dade County State Attorney. We have an agreement with them that talks through the specific charges that will be diverted and the process that diversion will look like. And that's how the diversion goes. So a young person gets arrested prior to having an official charge on for their case. They'll get assessed by the Department of Juvenile Justice here, that they make a recommendation to the state attorney, and the state attorney ultimately will say, yes, they can go to diversion, or no, they can't. So that's how it happens. Here in Dade County, we go through the program with them, and then should they successfully complete, there's no charge for their case. So that's how that works. And in terms of tools and mechanisms for cultural competence, yeah, S.O.U.L Sisters is an organization that is run by and has program staff that run the program that are directly impacted by systems. So, and are from the community. And so that comes with a lot of ease for our organization, because our staff know the community, they know what young people are interested in. They use the tools of art and art. We use tools from different cultural traditions, some of which like altar building. We use tools like, again, the arts, poetry, dance, etc. We're pulling a lot from those sorts of tools to support young people and finding spaces for expression. And restorative justice, I don't know if this was named, is a tool that comes out of Indigenous communities from this land. And so is in and of itself for many of our young people, because it comes from Indigenous folks here on this land and also in Africa, there's cultural competence in the tool if we use it right. And so that's it. And then also, we're checking in with young people all the time about what it is they want to get out of the program. What is it that you want to get out of this space? And then we are designing the structure of what we're up to with the young people in programming based on their direct feedback. And so we're always learning about what's culturally competent for youth, because that's always changing. And we're adjusting and we're adapting some of the elements of the program to do that. And I'll say lastly that Soul Sisters also, we really value social justice. And so we're teaching young people about social justice. We're teaching them about social justice heroes that they may not have heard of before. And that's actually helping young people to understand that the way they came to be in the system is rooted in centuries and generations of historical trauma and oppression. And that is very healing for young people to hear. So there are lots of tools and strategies, but those are some of them.
Great, thank you, Wakumi. And actually, Venus, very quickly, we've got 3 minutes left. So there was one question in here that asks what types of cases you all are diverting in Contra Costa County, and what was the evolution of that decision making around those case types?
Sure. When we began this process, restorative justice as the tool has a lot of the mechanisms kind of already built in. And so we were open to being taught, guided, led, told in some instances, which is a good thing, by Sandra and her team at Impact Justice on what types of cases restorative justice, is the most impactful for. They are serious felonies, and they are, or lower level serious felonies and higher level serious misdemeanors. The offense must have an actual victim. So we're not talking about a vandalism, a car break-in, and there was no person harmed, right, in the incident. They are really specifically for offenses where, again, you have a live actual person harmed, and the offense has to be serious enough for the youth to get something out of the process, and for the person harmed to feel made whole again as well. It's evolved in us thinking about not putting up, I think, barriers to kids being able to access the program. It's evolved in us thinking about blind spots and net widening for us to be very mindful of doing that. It's evolved in also us thinking about if there are other offenses that we're seeing, other parts of the county, who is eligible, right? Based on where you live, where the offense was committed. There are a number of things. We're about a year into our program, a year and a half, and it will continue to evolve. And that's the other thing I think you have to appreciate about the process is it's not set in stone. Kind of once it's created, that's the end all be all. You really have to be thoughtful in evaluating. We're also collecting the data as we go along. One, to measure recidivism, but also tracking what types of crimes, where the kids are coming from, and what could we be doing differently to ensure that as many kids as possible can access being part of the program. So I hope that was quick enough and informative enough.
Thank you so much, Venus. And I know that we are right at time, unfortunately. In closing, there was mention, Erica reminded me of speaking to adjustments made to RJ processes during the COVID-19 pandemic. We will put more information on this on JDAI Connect, but what I can say is that the restorative community conferencing process in our model, we did figure out a way to actually move through that entire process virtually. And that includes prep meetings being done on Zoom, supporting folks with tech needs, figuring out what a conference can look like virtually. And even though it is absolutely not ideal, it is being done. And I'll just say that restorative justice is all about meeting folks where they're at, and really adjusting to the lived reality of everyone involved. And so the pandemic is no different in that regard. And I just want to thank everyone who joined us today, all of the panelists. Thank you all so much. We're 1 minute over, but I do want to open it up to our wonderful panelists to say goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure.
It was a pleasure. Everyone take good care.
Thanks so much. Have a good one. Bye.